And we are live to talk about the rule of law or lack thereof when it comes to our foreign policy. So I have with me today, thank God, Kurt Hackparth and Jose Luis Granados Ceja of the Soberanía podcast, of Mexico Solidarity Media, formerly of Venezuela Analysis for Jose Luis. And if he has a chance to talk about why that is a former thing, that's probably pertinent to this conversation. But we are obviously here to talk about Venezuela, what's happening, the latest, and also to combat some of the rhetoric that is already coming out of this administration, which has surprised absolutely nobody. And I am going to be watching the live comments. Hello, Carol. Thank you for joining. If you guys do have questions, please put them in there. We'll do our best to get into it, but we do have a bit of an agenda that we're going to get to first. So, Kurt, Jose Luis, thank you so much for taking time. You have been running the media circuit. You have been attending rallies and protests and interviews. And you, first of all, you get one big "I told you so." You get to hold it up. Where you guys should have made poster boards that are like "I told you so" and hold it up, because you guys have been talking about this for a long time. And it was clear from the very first boat strike that this was in the water, no pun intended. And that we were on a collision course to just such a thing. And unfortunately, we woke up yesterday to that. It is obviously a very complicated subject. And so what I will say off the bat to everybody who is listening and will listen later, nobody is going to one side this here. Nobody is saying that, like Maduro is like an angel that we needed to protect. And nobody is saying that, like he is like that he deserved this, because that's not like, this is so like, that is so far beyond like the point of this conversation. Like, we're really here to talk about sovereignty, international law, and what's left of it. We're here to talk about the actual real world consequences that are being ignored in the media, especially the consequence of lives, innocent lives. And we're also here to talk about what can be next. Like, there's obviously dangers for the precedents that this sets. So, hello, Peter from Ireland. So what we are going to do is we're first going to talk about the fact that we no longer have a sitting president in Venezuela. He is, as far as Venezuela is concerned, still the president, but he is no longer in the country. He is incarcerated in New York. The indictment came out this morning. I invite you all to go read it. It's exactly what you would expect from our DOJ. It's barely even worth talking about. I was just reviewing charges, and they're very, like, good luck proving it in court, y'all. But beyond that, there's obviously like a vacuum. The sitting VP has been sworn in as the president as of this moment. The Supreme Court has affirmed her as the Supreme Court of Venezuela has affirmed her as the president right now, according to their constitution. So everything is constitutionally going as it should. However, the immediate question to both Trump himself and then also to some House reps, some conservative House reps yesterday, and I'm talking about the U.S., was about Marina Corina Machado. And who, for those of you who don't know, no, she was not the opposition candidate in the last election. She was actually not allowed to run. And I would love for you guys to talk about why she wasn't allowed to run, because there seems to be a lot of information about that. Gonzalez was the opposition candidate. He lost. There's a lot of questions about the election itself. And again, if you guys want to go into that, you can. But the immediate thing that everybody was asked was, is Machado, I tend to call her by her first name because I'm frustrated with her, but is Machado going to be the next president? And there have been words. The answer, as far as Trump is concerned, is no, which is not shocking. The House of Representatives in the U.S., at least as far as some of the GOP members, seem to be confused about why he said no. That was a whole thing. They got real testy about that. So given that setup, let's talk about Machado. Jose Luis, I know this is kind of your area of expertise. So if you want to just take it away and talk about the context of this woman and what could possibly be next and all that sort of thing.
So when it comes to Maria Corina Machado, it's interesting because Trump's comment actually put a smile on my face, believe it or not, because he told the truth for once. I had been talking about Machado on various programs and basically pushing back against this narrative that she was the leader in waiting, the anointed, opposition leader who was ready to bring freedom and democracy to Venezuela. I mean, that's obviously been a narrative that has been crafted deliberately. I think her winning, the Nobel Peace Prize was very much about that agenda, about trying to position her as the most likely person to succeed into the presidency, given some kind of regime change effort. But Trump yesterday says, "Oh no, she doesn't really have the respect in the population," and that's basically the case that I've been making throughout. She is not that popular of a figure. Obviously, her profile today is large, especially outside of Venezuela, but within Venezuela as well. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that just the hapless opposition in Venezuela, which was unable to really kind of provide any other leadership, and they pretty much settled on her because that was all that was left, basically. There was this really interesting exchange between her and Hugo Chavez ahead of the 2012 presidential election, where she's challenging him, where she said on his expropriation, saying, "Oh, you're stealing. This is theft." All the rest of it, and he kind of brushes her off. He's like, "You're out of ranking, right? Like you need to win the primary, and then maybe you and I can have a debate together." An eagle doesn't hunt a fly. Águila no caza mosca, and that's kind of what Venezuelans knew about her until more recently in her profile growing. But the truth is that she was always a marginal figure. She was always somebody who was not very popular, even within the Venezuelan opposition. She was somebody who represents a radical fringe of the Venezuelan opposition, a hard line, hard right position. And in fact, you can see her commentary that she has made in English, where she was promising to basically give away the country. And from as much as people in the opposition and even the broader Venezuelan population may have had disagreements with the Venezuelan government led by Chavez and later by Maduro, there were a lot of things that she was saying there that are just flagrant violations of the Venezuelan constitution, talking about giving away the resources. She even used really sexist language, talking about Venezuela as like a sexy woman that was going to be sold or publicized. I mean, she was never somebody who was ever going to be able to bridge that gap and actually be a unifying figure. And it's interesting that, of all people, the person who finally admitted it was Donald Trump. And I think because they are aware that what's next is not exactly clear, that if they don't actually uh, watch in terms of what their next steps are going to be, that the country could largely become a very, in a very vulnerable position. I don't like to use the term failed state because I think it's been instrumentalized in kind of in a way that only seems to be used in the case of countries where there's, imperialism is seeking regime change. But, that was kind of a danger, that if they had tried to install someone like her who doesn't have that much support outside of her kind of hardline base, that the country was going to fall into chaos. And Trump said so himself in his press conference. This is about oil. What they want is access to the resources in Venezuela. And they seem to be making a bet that they'll be able to get more through operating with the existing succession in Venezuela with the executive vice president, Delcy Rodriguez, who, as you said, has now been formally signed in as acting president, than they could have with Machado. So it's a calculation. It's kind of a cold calculation on the part of U.S. policymakers. But I'm grateful because it exposes that farce, that she was never going to be the figure that was going to transform Venezuela. That, it's really unfortunate that so many people kind of bought into it, that started thinking about her as, as a reasonable person to take over when her ideas are out of the mainstream, even in Venezuelan society. She became an important symbol, sure, but she was never going to be able to be the president. It's interesting that even U.S. recognizes that.
I really appreciate you weighing in on that. I laughed as well when I heard Trump say, like, she doesn't have the respect. And I was like, is it Jose Luis talking or is it Donald Trump talking? Like, this is so weird. Like, we are in the upside down. As you guys have pointed out several times, what is interesting about President Trump is that he will say things that your typical political pundit figure, the ones who are kind of dyed in the wool public policy and foreign policy and whatever, knows not to say out loud, right? Like he says the part where it's about oil. He says that she doesn't have the support of the people. He says all of these things with his mouth. And so you end up going like, oh, okay. Like, thanks for giving away the game. And I'm sure his handlers are back there, like, just screaming to the sky, And as I pointed out, the U.S. House reps for the GOP, they had a press conference yesterday. And a reporter very quickly asked them, like, so what do you take of the president saying Machado is not the person? And he was like, yo, whoa, 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 like got so defensive about it. And I was like, so sorry. Someone is
Likewise, today, Marco Rubio, I think it was Meet the Press, one of these Sunday news programs, he's basically trying to fix some of what Trump broke when he said, "Oh, we're going to administer the country."
and
Because
Rubio's like,
for me, when he talked like that, it's like you're talking about an occupation. You're talking about boots on the ground. And now he's trying to walk it back. They seem to want to they want to manipulate Delcy Rodriguez, to do their bidding. And there's been a lot of speculation in terms of like, oh, did she hand over Maduro? Was this a palace coup? Was this, a conspiracy? I don't think so at all. Anybody who's familiar with her trajectory would not believe that. She's somebody who has been a diehard Chavista for a long time. She comes from a family of leftists. Her father was assassinated by a US backed Venezuelan regime. So I find it really difficult to believe. But I do think that, of course, I think she did have a phone call with Rubio. I think her objective in that phone call was to stop the attack. Trump said so himself that the next step was going to be a second, larger, more violent attack. And, I made this comment earlier on a different program, but, it's very easy for us abroad who are not in the middle of that, who are not responsible for people's lives, to kind of puff out our chest and be like, no, we must resist until the last man standing. And I understand that conviction, but I think Delcy made the calculation is that they've already killed dozens of people. They have kidnapped our president. We don't even know if he's still alive. We don't know where he is. My mission now is to get some kind of calm, and probably did whatever she needed and said whatever she needed to say to get the U.S. to stop its attack. It's very, very sad, obviously, everything that went down on Saturday night, Friday into Saturday night. But, you know, clearly there was overwhelming power, military power used by the United States against a country that is very dignified, but obviously is also in a weakened state as a result of the U.S. unilateral coercions campaign, about its inability to invest in its defense infrastructure. There were some people who were speculating, well, why isn't there any resistance? There was resistance. And in fact, I believe Maduro himself was injured because he was limping in the videos of him in New York.
Yeah.
So there also was imagery provided by journalists on the ground inside of La Carlota Air Base that showed that the missile batteries, the air defense systems, had been bombed and targeted and destroyed. Right. And so I think that helps explain why there was probably a mood amongst the leadership in Venezuela to kind of stop the attack, to stop this from getting any worse, for it to become a wide scale massacre. And so I don't think we should allow that response in the moment to dictate our evaluation of what Delcy may do. We know what the United States wants her to do. They want her to become a client leader who will do anything under the threat of assassination or kidnapping, which is what they threaten. Trump says as much. Anybody who's thinking about doing this should know that we just did it and we're able to do it and we'll do it again. But obviously, also preserving the territorial integrity of Venezuela. Those are the stakes. It's about making sure that Venezuela as an entity can continue to exist, because the United States has just declared to the world that they don't care about any rules, any laws, any standards, anything.
Yeah.
And would be willing to destroy the country and kill as many people as necessary.
Right. I want to double click on the part where you said dozens of Venezuelans were killed, because I have unfortunately seen way too much reporting around no service members were killed, there were no casualties and whatever for the US. And it's like that part has gotten dropped over and over and over again. And it's like, this was not a bloodless revolution or whatever the hell we want to call it, right? Like this was a sucker punch on on a sovereign nation. Sovereignty is I think the biggest question here is, do I want someone looking at the U.S. and going like, they have a pretty dictatorial president right now, and those people need saving, and also they have a lot of resources that we would like to have. So let's go get, and I saw one comment on social media that was like, trust and believe there'd be people celebrating in the streets if you came to get our man too. But it still doesn't make any of this right. It still actually is not good for literally anybody. And I can't emphasize enough that like this has already cost lives. And I think any president acting or whatever is well within her purview to act however she needed to act to just make it stop, which is like I think that's the correct decision. That purity politics thing of like, we resist to the last man. It's like, that's okay. Well, say that about the children or whatever in the street who end up, as casualties in this. And like, that's not like, at some point we have to make different decisions. So yeah, I really appreciate you highlighting that whole thing. Let's so we talked about how Machado is definitely not the heir apparent. We've talked about what this actually has cost Venezuela so far, and the state of the union there. I want to talk about the comments about Mexico. You are both obviously journalists in Mexico, so this is like primary um, your primary beat. Obviously, Latin America is a region, and the Americas are a region as well. And so you do a great job of trying to make sure you zoom in and widen and narrow the aperture as needed. But Trump had things to say about President Sheinbaum, about Mexico, in a call to Fox News immediately following this operation. And they were extremely disturbing to me. As a U.S. citizen who has no ties to Mexico that I'm aware of, but just as like someone who would like some peace and quiet for one, but also knowing that they are our number one trading partner. And also that, you know, President Sheinbaum isn't really someone. She's not someone I would play with. I mean, just on a personal level, just from like observing her, it's like those jokes of like, why is it like, would you play with that person? It's like, no, I would never. I would actually not do that. I don't think it's worth any of that. And so anyway, I would love either or both of you, if you want to go, to talk about first of all what he said, and also what has been the response. It seems like the cool heads thing is still prevailing as far as like we're not gonna, we're gonna strongly talk about sovereignty, but we're also not going to like let you rile us up. So however you guys want to take that away. And
yeah, I'll jump in on that one. I just wanted to make a comment about this idea of lives, because the problem is in U.S. empire, in the U.S. government, and in the U.S. corporate press, Latin American lives don't matter. Venezuelan lives don't matter. Mexican lives don't matter. No one's lives outside of the U.S. matter, and many lives within the U.S. don't matter. So we saw today an obscene tweet by the U.S. ambassador to Mexico, Ron Johnson, gloating about the operation, right? And making that exact point. No U.S. service members were killed. Can you imagine how tone deaf that is to be making that kind of boast to a Mexican public who saw, people in their brother sister culture, right? Maduro's personal guard getting mown down by these people. And as you pointed out, Kate, in a previous video, not mowed down by anybody, but by Delta Force. Delta Force out of Fort Bragg. That Delta Force that was involved in the Fort Bragg cartel that Seth Harp has been telling us about over the course of the last year. And as Seth said very ironically in a tweet today, if anybody was involved in the drug trade in this whole operation, it wasn't Maduro, it was the Delta Force people who did the invasion in the first place.
for real. Amen.
So those lives don't matter, and they never have. Right? They're totally disposable. That's why they're invisible to so many people, right? And they only see, as you were saying before we started the show, just this far beyond their noses.
Yeah. Well,
the
service members themselves, the operators themselves are expendable to this administration. Like they're just like, I mean, even if we had lost lives, they would have been like the price, the whatever, we're the liberty and something, and like, it's
not worth any life being lost, neither a service member nor any of the Venezuelans and Cubans and others who were killed in this. And that's not to mention how many thousands of lives have been killed by the sanctions from 2017 onward. How many thousands of lives have been affected by those? More invisible people because it wasn't part of an actual military strike. They were just, killed by lack of food and medicine and other things over the course of years. Right? So with regards to Mexico, it's really important that we bring that up because we've talked about in our previous appearances how Trump has been turning the screws on Mexico in a number of ways over this first year. One of them is the on and off tariff threats. Notice that Trump isn't talking about tariffs against Mexico anymore. He threatened that about 4 times. And then now that the actual effects of the tariffs are kicking in the United States, he's quietly ditching that rhetoric. But he held it over Sheinbaum and the Mexican public's head over the course of the entire last year. And then there's the whole screwworm issue, the prohibition of importing Mexican cattle, beef, the whole argument over the water treaty, which has been, back and forth, the shared watersheds between the two countries and who has to give who how much water, right? Anything Trump can turn screws on. And the big one coming up for this year is going to be the review of the free trade agreement. And according to an article we saw and we've talked about in the podcast in El País, Trump is basically asking for the whole show.
Right.
He wants unfettered U.S. access to the Mexican economy, including parts that have been carved out and protected, like energy. He wants no regulations. He wants nothing that could, present the least opposition to multinational takeover of the Mexican economy and just like energy, mining, and other areas, right? And he also wants, according to this report, a veto on any foreign direct investment coming in that isn't from the United States that they don't like. And of course, that means China.
Yeah.
That means China. So the United States now is claiming to want and claiming to have the right to, because of the free trade agreement, an absolute veto over any investment in Mexico that it doesn't like. And it wants to extend that to all of Latin America. This is the Don Roe doctrine, people. It is a temporary re-entrenchment in Latin America in order to create, the mineral access and the supply chains, whatever else, to then be able to go back out and attack China and attack Iran and use Venezuelan oil to attack Iran so it could be immune from Iran closing the Strait of Hormuz if it were to do that in the case of another strike. So that's what this is all about. It's naked geopolitics, and lives be damned, right? So that's the thing over the course of the entire continent. We saw in Argentina, right? Trump, holding over the poor Argentinian public head.
I know. Come back.
I think we might have lost him for a second there.
Yeah,
Here, I'm back.
All right.
Let's try it again. So, hold dangling over the heads of the Argentinian public a $40 billion bailout. People who've already been through years and years of hyperinflation and economic crisis. If you don't vote the way we want, you're not going to get your bailout. They did this in the Honduran election right now. Right?
Yep.
We'll turn the screws on you on will, and we'll release a cartel. We'll release a drug dealer, right? Juan Orlando Hernandez, right? If you talked about guilty of trafficking 40, all those tons of cocaine into the United States, those people can get released. So we have to see it in this geographical sense. And so what Trump wanted to do in the sense of Mexico is basically have a 2-for-1, right? Do with extraction operation in Venezuela and use that to scare Mexico so that Mexico will come to heel. That's what they want. They want Mexico to come to heel. They want to encircle Mexico and isolate it diplomatically by making sure that no progressive government exists in Latin America. They want to get rid of them all. And it's either by preventative frauds or by, releasing drug dealers like Juan Orlando Hernandez or by extraction operations. They want to get rid of every progressive government in the continent and isolate the few that exist. So it's very important this year that there are going to be presidential elections in Colombia and Brazil. So Sheinbaum is not in an easy position this year.
Right. And that his comments about Sheinbaum in that call with Fox News were, he was specifically talking, again, trying to act like the cartels run Mexico. It's a narco state, like pulling that whole tired thing out of the hat again. And also saying, I've offered to help her and she's always saying no. And like kind of trying to paint her as like not being part of the solution or whatnot, when like the truth of the matter is, it's like, well, you literally just invaded a different country. And so if your help is invading my country, the answer is obviously no, which I wanted to make sure I like highlighted, like, the historical behavior that you just so beautifully talked about, Kurt, and laid out for us as the naked, resource grab that it is. But also the trying to paint her as like some sort of unreasonable or weak or controlled leader or whatever it is, to, because he's trying, that's the rhetoric and the propaganda is part of the name of this game, right? Like we're seeing it in the aftermath of the Venezuelan attack right now is like, well, Maduro's terrible, right? Like, we know all these things. And so therefore, like, this was fine. And can argue whatever you want, but like again, we're going to recenter on sovereignty. Like the fact that like the idea
That's
of
why our podcast is called Sovereignty.
Right.
Everybody who's watching this, that's why we chose that word.
Yes. In case you didn't know, Soberanía means sovereignty in Spanish. And it's funny, I was listening to y'all for months before I actually thought to look up what the word meant. I was like, what does this word even mean? And I was like, oh, look, that's cool. But I digress. I just, getting back to sovereignty, like the idea that we could tell another country who could and could not invest in them, right? Like what other trade deals that they could make. It's like, if it has nothing to do with our, if it doesn't have anything to do with you, then it has nothing to do with you. And it's like that, the whole mind your own business thing. I feel like, we learned it in grade school. I feel like there's some principles to apply here. It's like, what does this have to do with you exactly? Other than, what it is, which is it's about oil, it's about whatever. Anyway, I could go on and on. It'd be like preaching to the choir here. So I also, sorry, before we move on, the other thing I want to double click on for anyone who's listening or will listen later is economically, us doing this to anybody is stupid, right? It's just dumb. There's no way that this ends well. I saw someone who was like, we got trillions of dollars in oil out of this. I'm like, we didn't get anything. Like, we, the US people, got nothing. And like, be so for real. But especially to turn our eyes, even a side eye at Mexico like that, when again, our largest trading partner. So even if you are the most like pragmatic and non-humanitarian voter, if all you care about are the dollars, listen, everything that we have said so far is a terrible economic policy. If we want to complain about affordability in this country, this ain't it. Like, this is so counter to that. And I think, obviously, I think that the humanitarian things trump, in my own personal ethic and whatever, trump all of that. And the sovereignty trumps all of that. And just the general, like, world order trumps all of those things. But you might disagree with me as a voter. You might think that that's all secondary to your grocery bill or whatever. Great. Your groceries come from Mexico. Like, full stop. Like, by and large, when you're going to the store, most of that stuff is coming from Mexico, or it's coming from products that use products that are imported from Mexico. Like, it is absurd to believe that this type of foreign policy could result in anything decent for the average American economically. So please, please, please keep that in mind.
And just a quick point, and I know Jose Luis has a lot to say on this, and I think this has really been not recognized. What is going to be a very practical and very toxic effect of the United States swooping in and extracting, i.e. kidnapping a world leader? It's going to lead many countries to develop nuclear programs, right? With the idea that that's the only deterrence left in the absence of international law and the absence of any kind of international rules whatsoever, right? Latin America, as of now, is a nuclear non-proliferation zone by treaty. I don't know if it's going to be in another 10 years. These are the kinds of effects that happen when Trump does his stupid made-for-TV shows, like you pointed out, like wanting to have a kidnapping event on New Year's, as you just had to postpone for a few days. We might very well see countries, including major powers in Latin America that had never considered this before, bailing out of that treaty and saying, we have to have nukes, right? Because otherwise we're just at the mercy of these people. Right. It would be a very unfortunate but logical response to an anarchic world order where the only rule now is might makes right.
100%. Jose Luis, was there anything you wanted to add to that?
No, on that, I would say that because there seemingly is now no deterrent, to pick up on what Kurt was saying about that leaked report in terms of the demands from the United States in these negotiations, why wouldn't they go for the maximum demand? Why wouldn't they? They're going to ask for everything, and they're going to say, if you don't, we're going to kidnap you.
Mm-hmm.
He's good. I mean, this is the world we live in now. On the nuclear question, I actually was on a program earlier today where I made that call. Why shouldn't we? If that's the only thing that's going to stop you, then we should make a collective pact and have a bunch of nuclear arsenals. And if you attack one of us, then we'll use them.
Right.
That's the world we live in. That's the world that the United States has just created. It's dangerous. It's more dangerous than what the world was like a few days ago. But do you think, if people think that we're just going to lay down and take it, they're sorely mistaken. I'll be the first one on the front lines defending our territory. It's not going to happen. So I know that sounds dramatic, but I can't help but feel this way now.
Right.
I mean, and then the condemnations have not been strong enough. I am encouraged. I saw that there was a statement from a number of Latin American countries together with Spain that was more forceful. Finally, I think we were sitting on our hands for far too long, hoping that these multilateral institutions were going to get their shit together and say something, and they clearly didn't. So I'm glad that, if that's all we have left, to create ad hoc groups that are willing to do it, then that's what we're going to do. I know the OAS and CELAC are meeting today in emergency sessions. I don't expect much. I saw the statement from the new Secretary General of the OAS, and it was pathetic. The statement from the UN Secretary General was worse. It was even more soft, talking about calling on all parties. What are you talking about? What did Venezuela do?
Right.
It was the United States,
right,
who invaded and kidnapped a president. And you couldn't even bring there has never been a more clear violation of the UN Charter in modern times than what just happened. The United States can't exercise and extend, as Hegseth said, the long arm of American justice the way that it just did. There are 192 member states. One of them had an indictment against Maduro, and that gives them the authority to invade a country.
Right.
So can Mexico indict Trump for sending all of these guns into Mexico? And can we go and kidnap him?
Well, no.
That's the rule that they just set. And yet the Secretary General can't bring himself to say this was illegal.
Right.
And it's so bizarre and grotesque that part of the charges against Maduro in this indictment in New York is about weapons possession.
Right.
So now U.S. domestic weapons laws apply internationally.
Right.
Just
exactly.
like U.S. domestic sanctions.
Yes. Oh, no. Come back there, Kurt. Come back, Kurt.
Let's be very clear about what we're talking about here. We're not talking about international sanctions, right, that have the seal of approval of the UN Security Council. These are unilateral coercive measures.
Correct.
These are unilateral coercive measures that have no validity in international law. Who cares about international law anymore? But I think, U.S. exceptionalism is such that, it's such that it rots the brain.
Right.
And it leads one to believe that other people's lives don't matter, like we said at the beginning, right? And also that U.S. actions don't have consequences, right? Like kidnapping a president isn't going to lead to countries developing nuclear weapons program, for example, along with a raft of other geopolitical consequences that we're not going to see today or tomorrow, but we're going to see fairly soon, right? But also this idea that U.S. domestic law immediately applies now anywhere, right? All the president has to do now is get their attorney general to make up some bullshit indictment, and that means they can invade and kidnap anyone.
Yes.
So that means that, Congress, not that Congress is doing fuck all anyway, sorry for the language.
That's a whole other thing.
But the congressional power to declare war is dead. I mean, obviously, they're still using the authorization for military force from 2001.
Right.
Which has nothing to do with the present situation anyway. But now it's totally circumvented. Just make up some charges. Maduro had a pistol under his couch.
Yeah.
So that's it. That's enough.
Which is really funny. The whole weapons thing cracked me up. Again, I read the indictment and I was just like, okay. Because last I checked, I believe Mexico sued the U.S. for weapons, and the Supreme Court actually ruled because of PLACA that, you can't really hold arms dealers accountable and all this sort of thing. And I'm like, so can we hold arms dealers accountable or not? Because it seems like we're treating Maduro like he's an arms dealer. Like one of the charges is about arms dealing. And I was like, so which law are we following here? Because you all just tossed out the Iron River, basically lawsuit. That's not what it was called, but that's basically what the lawsuit was about in the Supreme Court, the U.S. Supreme Court. Because again, we're apparently the police of the world now, guys. And that you toss that out under PLACA. So I'm trying to understand how we're now got some president in New York that we just kidnapped in New York that we are now going to indict on charges of weapons that he may or may not have known. Like, it's just so, anyway, whatever. Obviously, as we've talked about ad nauseum, and as I've talked about, and you guys have separately, like, the hypocrisies never cease. It is, the American exceptionalism hypocrisy. I several weeks ago did a video explaining the sanctions. I was like, the sanctions are from our Department of Treasury. They're not even they're not sanctions from anywhere else. It's like we made a rule in our land, and then we pointed to another land and said, so we made this rule and you're violating it. And it's like, so what's stopping anyone from doing the same thing?
They're not even consistent about that. I heard Marco Rubio again in the press conference talk about sanctioned oil. That's not a thing.
Right.
That doesn't exist even within the rules of the Office of Foreign Asset Control of the U.S. Treasury Department.
Right.
You can sanction entities. You can sanction vessels. You cannot sanction commodities.
Right.
There's no such thing as sanctioned oil. And yet there they are lying to the U.S. public, as they also lied to lawmakers. They promised lawmakers, don't vote for the War Powers Resolution because we're not actually going to war with Venezuela. I saw again Marco Rubio saying, no, we're not at war with Venezuela. We're at war with drug traffickers. So then they are at war with Mexico. And I want to read this headline that I just came across. That's why I was a little distracted here. From Ceteo, from Brent Thacker. And he writes, new, Trump admin officials tell Ceteo that Trump is, quote, very interested, end quote, in secret plans drawn up last year to send U.S. Special Forces into Mexico. One official even says Trump recently asked for updates on preparations for a possible operation. We need to operate under the assumption that this is going to happen in Mexico.
Right.
And that is really worrisome.
Yeah.
This is going to probably happen in Mexico. It's the safer bet to assume that it is. They already shown to all the world that they don't give a rat's ass about a country's sovereignty.
Yeah.
So what are we going to do? Now is the time. Yesterday was the time, but now is a better time to get ready because it's coming.
Right. Yeah, it's incredibly disturbing. I before you signed on, Jose Luis, Kurt and I were chatting a little bit, and we, like, I said, like, when I woke up yesterday morning and saw this, I was just like, how am I simultaneously not surprised and also, like, had hoped very, very hard that this was, like, not going where we could all see it was going. Anyone with eyeballs in their head could see it. So it wasn't like it was.
Well, even I mean, but I'm a super close observer of Venezuela, and I went to bed early. I broke my hand on Friday in Mexico's earthquake, so I'm on a lot of painkillers. Yeah, it wasn't that bad, but I fell and broke my hand. I broke the metacarpal bone on my ring finger, the boxer's injury. So I'm on a lot of painkillers. I swear to you, I thought I was hallucinating. I thought maybe I wasn't awake yet because I grabbed my phone, as one does when you wake up, and I wake up around 5 a.m, and I had a text from my colleague Andreina who said they've taken our president, and I was like, wait, what? And then I started looking, and then it all started coming. I was like, I told my partner, I was like, I can't believe this is happening. Like, I always knew it was possible, and that it was successful. That I thought it would have played out differently. I mean, also, I think that's also worth mentioning is just the overwhelming power of the U.S. military. There's a reason why they spend $1 trillion a year at the Pentagon. Yep. It's for these kinds of things. Yep. I mean, I think Venezuela obviously had a weakened capacity to resist as a result of, decades long campaign against it, but the whole thing really did surprise me about the way it played out.
Yeah.
But how are your healthcare premiums doing? Everybody who's watching this, put in the chat how much your healthcare premiums doubled or tripled on January 1st, while that $1 trillion went to Delta Force so they can do a big show in Venezuela and kill people. Right? Because
by the way, this injury didn't cost me a single penny out of pocket. I went to my clinic. I went to the hospital. I was in and out in under 4 hours with a cast on my hand, 3 x-rays done. All of it, no cost.
Yeah. We would have paid like $2,000.
You could be spending your money on that instead of invading Venezuela.
Yes.
And just, to the point, right? Because now the New York Times, which has been doing what I love the line by Adam Johnson, it's been liberal washing the whole thing, right? Liberal washing this whole invasion, now says that the decision in the war room to finally go into Venezuela was made because Maduro was dancing too much. Can you imagine that framing? Can you imagine that? First of all, it's a lie, right? Because they don't go in because Maduro dances; they go in for oil. But can you imagine kind of childish, right, framing that the New York Times expects us to swallow? That it's because he was dancing too much, and so the Trumpians were like, "Oh, he's mocking us."
Yeah.
So that's it now? We're going to kill people because a president of the country was dancing? That's where we are? Whether that was true or not, or whether the New York Times thinks we're stupid enough to swallow that framing, I don't know what's worse.
Yeah. Well,
That's
the
the
New York
line, because
Times
it absolves the U.S. It absolves the U.S. of any responsibility. Oh, we had to do it because he was humiliating us. He was mocking us, and nobody mocks the United States.
I mock the United States all the time, but on that point, there's some reporting now that the New York Times and Washington Post actually had knowledge of this,
and they didn't say anything.
And they didn't say anything, which is disturbing beyond belief. But that's a whole other thing that we have to contend with at some point. So I would love, I know I want to wrap up here. I know you guys have been hitting the the pavement and dealing with the fallout of this, and this is going to go on for God knows how long at this point. And so I don't want to keep you too much longer, but I would love what from Mexico, because we apropos of what we were just talking about. What do you want people here in the U.S. to know, say, do? I obviously always talk about making a fuss. I plan to call the whole freaking world tomorrow with all of my grievances, and I specifically plan to talk about, like, I am very concerned about the president's remarks about Mexico in particular. I like, what are we freaking doing to our number one trading partner, to probably one of our best partners as far as combating actual cartels, like as most cooperative partners.
The real stuff.
Right. Yeah. What are, so what is this nonsense? So obviously we're pushing for the action and raising our voices as always, but is there anything in particular that the two of you would say to my audience, to anybody who's listening back to this later, that you're like, this is what you need to know from Mexico, from Latin America, about what just happened and what comes next? I know it's a broad question.
Go ahead, Listen.
I think all of us are vulnerable in this new world. I saw a comment there from I'm worried in Canada. You should be. Because especially the Prime Minister of Canada basically just said it's okay to do what the United States just did, which is such a short-sighted vision, because he has literally threatened Canadian sovereignty as well. And if this is, as we understand it, is driven by a quest for resources, this is a structural issue. There's no dissuading U.S. imperialism from not seeking control and dominance over resources and those access to resources. So if Donald Trump decides that he really needs Canada's resources, and there are a lot of them in that country, he's going to go for them.
Right.
And you have a leader that's unwilling to draw a line. That part is scary. Yeah. I also saw a comment here from, journalists should be asked to not lie to the public. They essentially did in this case. Trump in this press conference, we couldn't tell Congress because Congress leaks. This had leaked. There was a lot of outlets, I believe the Times and the Post both had access before the operation started, that this was going to go down, and they held back from reporting on it for whatever reasons, for editorial reasons. But that's essentially lying by omission. Maybe this operation wouldn't have gone ahead if it had leaked, if they had been responsible journalists to say, hey, we're about to commit a huge illegal act. So it's about really putting pressure on every single institution, not just political ones, but the mainstream media, but also the society at large. I have been encouraged by seeing the mobilizations. There was an impressive turnout given the short notice in terms of people taking to the streets. But even then, you're also dealing with a regime that has also shown a total willingness to crush any and all dissent and to utilize what is essentially the Gestapo and through these federal agencies to basically stop any kind of dissent.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
this is a question of democracy, about freedom, which I know are important concepts to the US public.
And just to add to that, we have to resist the framing that the two-party system wants us to fall into, that the invasion is okay, but just let Congress vote on it. Or Maduro is terrible, but... So they always try to hedge and leave it into a very narrow, realm of debate. It's still not okay if Congress, votes for it. And I saw one of the, right, as Jen's saying here in the comment, just ask nicely, was saying something about Hakeem and Chuckles there, not doing anything. This has been a total dereliction of duty on the part of the Democratic leadership. Yes. Total. Where are they? Where are they? Right? And that's where the pressure has to go, to not allow that framing of the debate to be the thing, right? This kind of New York Times framing like, well, he danced too much, so, well, he had to do it, but no servicemen were killed yet.
Right. Yeah.
Yet.
Right. Yeah.
Right? Because, the clown show is such that, and we've talked about this on our show, Sin Muros here as well, you don't know what's going to win, right? The nastiness, right? The criminality, or the sheer clownish incompetence.
Right.
So you have Trump and Rubio contradicting themselves on basic facts, like whether they're going to occupy the country or not, because it apparently seems like they don't even know.
Right.
They don't even know themselves. Or if they do, the plan is changing constantly. But these 48 to 72 hours are going to be crucial. People should be out in the streets because they're still deciding whether they're going to send in a second wave or what they're going to do, right? People power in the streets in Venezuela is huge, and Mexico is huge, and it's huge up there.
Right.
It's very important, right? And the other thing I would say is, as José Luis said, we have to call out the corporate media, we have to call out the government, we have to call out, both parties, but we also have to, marches are important. But what the United States no longer has is trade union power sufficient to actually gum up the works, like the Genoa dock workers who are refusing to ship arms to Gaza. So join a union. Join a union, and join a union that is willing to put itself on the line to actually stop weapons from going to Venezuela and blocking those kind of things economically where it counts, not just symbolically.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm reading the comments here, and someone says, I'm afraid if there's no consequences, he will kidnap mayors and governors here. He's openly fantasized about doing this.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
Right. Yeah. I couldn't agree more. And it's interesting, like, I simultaneously recognize that obviously kidnapping, someone here on U.S. soil, certainly a sitting official that would have a lot of publicity and eyes on it, is different than what has just happened as far as the appetite for it, which is bad. The appetite shouldn't be there regardless, but reality, it is there. And how much this administration has been pushing on that with, like, trying to get Monica McIver indicted for something against, they can never seem to figure out which one exactly they're upset about. That Judge Hannah Dugan from Wisconsin got convicted of obstructing justice based on, I think, some very interesting evidence, but whatever. Because she was running her courthouse and her courtroom like what she thought was supposed to be happening, which is that you're not supposed to be picking these people up at their hearings and without warrant. Like, she asked for a warrant, they didn't provide one, and so she was following the rule of law, but she's been convicted for obstructing justice somehow, and we're sort of in the upside down. And so there has absolutely been plenty of testing. It's like the little kid who's like testing their parent to see how far they can go. And unfortunately, we're having to gentle parent our president and his clown show. And we're not gentle parenting anymore, but we need to stop gentle parenting. That's the treatise here, guys, is like, no more gentle parenting. But we are having to be like the grown-ups in the room, we the people. And I know that I sound like a broken record over the last couple of weeks, everybody, but when I tell you that these midterms could not be more existential and dire and consequential, I mean, like, first of all, it feels so far away, and so it's already exhausting and, like, kind of feeling like, but I want you to resist the nihilism of all of this, because as serious as this is, as serious as this is, and as scary as it is all of those things. And yet there are people like the two gentlemen you see with me and others who haven't stopped fighting. And the minute you stop fighting that's when they win. It's not, they want, like, yes, obviously there's a lot of might. We just saw it on display. That was part of this whole exercise, was to show everybody, including the US itself, like, this is how powerful we are and whatever, and we'll just come get you if you don't cooperate. But they also can't be everything everywhere all at once. They really can't. When we look at even the resistance stateside of what's going on, there are so many battles they have lost. What I found so, like, chef's kiss about some of it, again, there's very little to celebrate in what I think is this tragedy. But the day that they wanted to do the operation was the day they also had to simultaneously pull the National Guard from Portland, Chicago, and Los Angeles because of the Supreme Court's ruling, because a law professor at Georgetown wrote a brief to the Supreme Court saying, here's a way that you can actually do the right thing for once in your freaking lives without having to really tell daddy no. And they took it. The centrists, the ones who pretend to be centrists on the Supreme Court, took that because they are actually scared of our public opinion. So if we the people, don't think that there's power, like, there is power. It's very exhausting. It's very hard. And we are on a slanted playing field. They are absolutely have plenty of might and awfulness to use. However, like, you must organize, like Kurt just said so beautifully, like, find something to organize with, or organize, like, your efforts. I'm organizing all my efforts around midterms right now. Make a plan to vote so that we have a Congress that will actually stand up to this. Non-interventionist multilateral foreign policy is the only way to have, like, any measure of peace, and this ain't it.
And vote in primaries, too, for anti-war candidates.
Yes, exactly. And that's why I'm doing this work now in January, because we got primaries starting in 2 months. 2 months, right. Maybe even next month, we've got primaries starting. And this is when you actually put in candidates who are not two wings of the same bird. I saw that in a comment. So, okay, I know that was like my sermon on civic engagement, but, like, this is the only way, because they're going to use the weapons and the Delta Force, right? We have civic engagement. History tells us that our way is better for the long term, but it's harder. And in the meantime, it's really heartbreaking. So, like, I recognize all of the hurt and the pain and the exhaustion and whatever, but we really cannot stress enough how much this is going to matter. Like, we are in the end game now, if you're a Marvel fan. Okay. Jose, Luis, and Kurt, thank you so much for taking the time to be here with me today. I know that, I was, like, texting you all immediately yesterday because I was like, the ones that I would call for this are probably, like, running around like chickens with their heads cut off, which I know you both were, and really appreciate your work. I can't say enough again about these two. Please go listen to the Soberanía podcast. Please check in with Mexico Solidarity Media when you can. You guys also have a fundraiser going on right now, right?
I was just going to mention that. If we could plug the fundraiser.
Absolutely.
So right now, it's a very small scale fundraiser. What basically, the way we're billing it is, we want to get out of the studio and into the streets more, because we certainly here in Mexico, streets is where politics happen, and we want to be out there covering it more. But to do so, we need a little bit of support from our viewers and listeners. Want to buy some gear, get some assistant producers to help us get out there. It's tough because it's really a two-man operation. So sometimes we just don't have the capacity to do as much as we'd like to do. So we're doing this fundraiser right now. It's on GoFundMe. If you visit MexicoSolidarity.com, if you go to our YouTube page, it's all there. Come find us. If you're able to donate, we'd really appreciate it. We're about halfway there, and we want to make it to our goal there so that we can have that little bit of room to operate, to be able to bring you more content, because there's going to be more. There's a demonstration. There was demonstrations yesterday. Kurt was there. There'll be some today as well. This is more important than ever. That we have to practice politics in every way possible. So that also involves getting out there into the street as well.
Because this isn't going to stop. We know this. They're not going to stop themselves because they're out of control. They need to be stopped. It's the only way. After Venezuela, they want to do Colombia. They want to do Mexico. They want to do Cuba. They want to build up to, they want to do Iran. They want to do China. It's not going to stop. And that shouldn't be discouraging or, overwhelming. It's like, stop it now.
Correct.
Before it gets worse up here. which is, I think, what didn't happen when they started doing the boat bombings in September. We didn't stop it then. There wasn't enough pushback, so it escalates. So let's learn that lesson so it doesn't escalate 2 or 3 or 4 notches again. And so, yes, support alternative media. That's another way to help.
Also donate. When I send out the post of this recording, I will include the link to that fundraiser in there for you guys. Thank you guys so much again. Please get some rest. Jose Luis, heal the hand. I'm so sorry. Oh my God. That press conference, the Mañanera with Claudia Scheinbaum when the earthquake happened, like that went like viral over here because she was just like cool as a cucumber and like, it's okay, everybody, let's go this way. And I was like, wow, just like, what a queen. It's like a real adult in the room. Just amazing.
And if it had been the US, there would have been Secret Service grabbing and taking. And she's just like calmly, she's like letting the journalist leave first. She's like, it's this way.
She was reassuring panicked journalists.
Yeah.
Yeah, she was great. I was like, God, just like, why not?
Hey, that's
I
the cool
posted her.
head.
Oh, go ahead.
That's the cool head that has worked in negotiations thus far with the United States. So
Yep. Yes.
that was proof of it.
It was incredible. I posted her New Year's Eve speech because I was like, our president isn't capable of a New Year's Eve like comment that's worth anything. So we'll use this one instead. Anyway, she's amazing. All right. Yeah, I wish she was too, Kim. I do the cringy that's my president thing on her stuff sometimes. All right. Y'all have a great day. Again, rest up. Thank you for all of your work. We'll keep at it. And everyone else, get to work protecting all of our freedom. Bye, everybody.
Bye. Take care.